I almost wish like we had intro music.
we need something.
I guess that's the podcaster in me.
You need the bump.
It's the bump. Do you say the bump?
Yeah. Did I say it right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've only learned that that's what it's called in the last while. It's called the bump, but it's interesting to me.
Yeah,
it's interesting to me that I was thinking about tonight about the path from kind of journaling to blogging to kind of podcasting and vlogging, just the reflective practice. I remember a conversation that you and I had, I think, when we first met. And you correct me. Is it something that, does this sound about right? Maybe you and I talking about it somehow, and then you saying, yeah, that's the thing I have to get back to. That's the thing I have to start doing. Was this something that you could have said?
Yeah. It's actually, but I've been worse lately. It's weird. Like, I think I even mentioned it the last session that when you look at those essentials, I always go back to a quote from one of my last master's courses where my instructor said, it was mindfulness and spirituality in education. And he had a line where he said, what makes your soul sing?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that you know those things, but yet the others take over. So even though I know reflecting and blogging and sharing or creating, like this morning I sat there making a really lame animation in Keynote for our Twitter chat, but it was so much fun. But you can get stuck in the cycle where you're like, I can't believe I just spent an hour doodling random shapes that move on the screen.
You know what though? I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good with doodling random shapes on the screen. Like, you know, it's sort of like I start by agreeing with you and then I kind of go, no, you know what? Okay, so here's okay, I'll bring it back to the book.
Yeah.
So, so this is I'm Chris Clough and you get to be
Tina Zita.
And this is our second week of looking at Essentialism by Greg. I said it wrong last time, I think. I want to say Greg McCowan, but it's not Greg. Why do I think it's Greg McCowan? No, won't do it. McEwen?
McEwen? Keown?
And dude, you know what? I apologized to him last time too.
Did you?
I did. I'm having a definite flashback. So this is it's kind of week 2, but we're 2 weeks since we last talked. And yeah, we're going to try and wrap up part 1 for all of you following at home. So here's, I guess part of the reason I bring this up is I wanted to kind of start let's anchor this in teacher practice. I know for sure I did last week, 2 weeks ago. Like I go out into the ether. I don't come back easily, you know, like I often get that when I start talking, don't get me started. When I start talking about the intersections of me and EDU, I get like spacewalk kind of imagery in my head. And, you know, and just kind of like that floating out there and mesmerized by the space. And, you know, the tears are kind of coming out of the corner of your eye and you're crying because it's so beautiful. And then your oxygen thing kind of slowly pulls you back to the ship. No joke. Yeah. It's a bad habit of mine. So I'm going to try and change up myself a little bit. I'm going to start by anchoring it. Some of the things I was thinking about with this book, but in reference to teaching practice. Now, I remember when we left 2 weeks ago, there was that quick kind of like living the questions. So I'm going to try and do living the questions and tie it to this kind of format of doing a book chat and maybe looking a little bit at the universe with starry eyes. Yank me back if I get too far out. Okay? So I was in a couple conversations this week around reflective practice, and I started to look at reflective practice. I tried to think of what are the components, without getting too loose, what are the components of reflective practice? As in, if I dare to use the term, what are the essential components of reflective practice? And so living the question, here's where I kind of left last week. It was actually still rattling around in my brain, a question that Jen Apgar asked me. And any of you out there, you want to follow a beautiful brain, follow Jen Apgar on Twitter. Like,
she'll always make your brain go.
Yeah, like follow her right now, Jen Apgar. So when I first talked to her on my podcast, she right away kind of got in there in the mix right away, and she's like, "Okay, well, why is it that you podcast?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, this is good. Okay, give me some time." Like, she totally yanked my oxygen. Like, she's like, "Come back, Cliff, you're floating away again." So I started. It's come back to me again and again and again, because I will say wholeheartedly, I am someone that has run quite, like, I'm all over the place with my reflective my reflective practice. Like, I'll drop down a vlog, I'll do a podcast, I'm almost naively and unabashedly, I don't know what the word is. Like, I'm just, I almost think to reflect in public now more than I do in private. And it's not, one thing I did land on is it's not to build likes. It's not to kind of jump necessarily into other people's spaces, kind of drop a bug bomb and then get out. It's almost like I have found a lot of, I can find more connection to my ideas by creating them in this sort of digital format. The byproduct is that creating something in this digital format, the tools to be able to post it out or to go live are right there. And some of that is, I guess, it could be perceived as bravery. I think it's just more facility, as in, I just think to myself, record it, post it, record it, post it. Use cloud-based tools to store my thinking. Baseline. So then I move up and I'm like, well, why is it, or what are the components of reflective practice then? So if I try and isolate the essential pieces of what's allowing me to gain from this, because I'm addicted, but I'm interested. So it's not just that I think I'm going to put something sort of tantalizing or interesting out there. I think it's more that I feel like I want to give away or share ideas. And if someone happens to want to talk about it, fantastic. But I look at it as like a body of work. And Roland Chidiak, another great person to follow Roland Chidiak out there on Twitter. Some plugs tonight, right? Yeah. The idea of building a portfolio of works that I would say are representative of my thinking has also become really important. I would say, if anything, that is a singularity when I look at these, like what I'm motivated to achieve with my reflective practice. But back to Jen saying, why do I podcast? Okay. I think that where it started was me looking to kind of get in on other people's conversations, like just to sort of get stuff out there. It's kind of like the difference between, like throwing the ball. Have you seen that? There's that one viral video that's going around about the kid in their backyard throwing the ball over the fence.
No, I haven't.
And then like 3 seconds later, a dog comes and spits it back over the fence again.
That's awesome.
That I looked at, I'm like, that's why I podcast. Because of the space that I perceive myself to be in. And I would imagine that a backyard to a little kid seems pretty big. But imagine that your ball idea disappears over the fence somewhere and then kind of comes back slightly slobbery. Maybe you get a peek of the dog, peeking over the fence and then disappearing. Like, you never have the fullness of the relationship, but you have some interaction. And I think at the heart of it, that's, after me sort of the comfort zone of just reflecting in public, the other essential element to it for me is the idea of interaction. So I feel like, at least when it comes to EDU, I'm tapping into a common practice of kind of reflecting outwardly. Sorry, yank my oxygen.
No. I'm thinking, and I have, did we share the link? Barb can't find the link for tonight's session. Sorry.
How do we do that again? I love it. Oh, links.
Yep, possibly.
There we go. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll do it right now. I'll share it to Barb. I'm down with that.
She's she's following in her PJs, I'm sure, but
did she tell you to say? Did she tell you to say that?
No. No, she'll forgive me, I hope.
That's awesome. Oh, am I supposed to keep talking as I type?
No, no. So I think when you, I think that's kind of comes back to some of those pieces in the essence when they talk about those different sides, right? The essentialist does something because they choose to, and it's a choice you make to invest in your reflections.
Yes.
I guess that's what I'm missing about blogging too, is if I look back, I can see kind of those milestones in my own thinking.
I love how you're the thumbnail, by the way.
I'm the thumbnail? That's terrible.
Zena, you're a thumbnail.
That's not good. And you never realize how bad an outfit is till you're on camera in front of people. Like I just look,
you know what? I'm a cardigan. I'm a sucker for a good cardigan, dude. I'm a sucker for a good cardigan.
Yeah, and I guess that's the piece that, coming back to reflection, like I almost feel like that story of the German shepherds, where the German shepherds that experienced the shocks, that always experienced the shocks, just stayed in the shock, even though they could have, that weird little sketch that he had.
Yeah.
I wonder if as educators we find we get stuck in the busyness, or sometimes in the structures, right? Like those conversations we have that we can't try something new because of curriculum. Is it that sense? Are we stuck on this shock side, even though there's other options for us? I guess that his conversation about choice really struck a chord with me, I guess. Because I think the rat race happens and we like to blame it on the rat race.
Yeah. And maybe not paying attention to some of it that we engaged in the rat race in the first place.
Yeah. She sees us now.
What's that?
Barb sees us now.
Yay, Barb. Hey, Barb. Barb, if you want to, does Barb want to join in on the conversation? This doesn't, I mean, if she would like to, I can send her the link. I
think she has TweetDeck ready.
She can
I'll offer.
She can TweetDeck her heart's content. I get caught in that choice loop. There's that element of choice. I always feel, I saw somebody posted, and I don't organize my Twitter feed very well, but there was a post that came out that looked at, the guy's he's a big name. It's like a Alfie Cohen or a Simon Sinek talking about the 6 elements. Actually, you know what? I think I might be able to find it. The 6 elements that make you feel, I don't know. It wasn't connection to your work. It wasn't connection to your work, but it was talking about like agency and self-worth, sort of like corporate worth. Like there were a couple things in there. And I always, throughout the whole thing, Daniel Pink. There we go. I actually found it. So check this out. So Daniel Pink, he's actually quoting from an article. You know what? And I'll tag this. I'll put this on the feed for what we're doing right now. He's putting down here that the 6 traits that make a job meaningful. Now, essentialism, I think the book kind of just stays back from actually kind of saying that your work will be better. Like you'll actually enjoy your work more. There's a little bit of time spent there, but I found the book in general really tries to light a fire on you to be able to sort of go deeper with less things. Would you? Yeah.
Yeah, there was that. No, I have to try. The law of the vital few.
Yeah, throw that out if you got it.
It's on page 44 when he talked about. Sorry.
Sorry, it's
Digital copy.
for anyone that's listening to me. I'm trying to check it out on my iPhone. Plus, I have all these annotated post-it notes. Would be great if I had my paper copy. I don't know what I did with it. So somewhere on what page? Sorry.
No, I lost my page. Barb says she doesn't want to scare the internet. We'll have to rope her in another day.
Barb.
Page 44.
Okay.
It was the gentleman that did the Made in Japan story.
Yes.
How the law of the vital few, that focusing in on just a few elements of the production increased the whole value of it in general. That changed the whole mindset of something being made in Japan from a negative to a positive. It was an interesting, because I don't know if we actually would ever, I don't want to say value, but experience that in education. Just by the pure fact, at least from a K-8 perspective, where you're a core teacher, you're supposed to be learning about math and assessment, and instead of maybe just focusing in on relationships for this month.
Can I
Yeah.
Can I like totally put you on blast right now?
Okay.
See, I got my serious face on it.
All right. I'm a little scared now, but okay.
If we remove students as the essential, if we just don't focus on students as an essential element of our job right now.
Okay.
What else is in that space for you?
Other than students?
Yes. Here's the reason. Think about it. I'll chatter while you're thinking. Go ahead, mute my sound if it's like Clef, stop talking. So I'm existing somewhere between the Daniel Pink summary, this New Scientist article, and the 6 traits that make a job meaningful. Okay, authenticity, being your true self; agency, being able to exercise autonomy; self-worth, feeling valuable; purpose, an urgent goal; belonging; shared identity. So I should have said these are like 2 terms squished together. It's like, wait, Clef, you said there were 6, and then transcendence, a greater cause. So those are 6 layers, and I put it out to our hashtag. So if anyone wants to check it out, it's there. Yeah. So I look at that, and I actually put it out to a couple colleagues, and I said, which one of these are at the core of your job? Do you feel are at the core of your job? No one said 6. No one said 6. I think there's some connectivity here between the book, though, and looking at these 6 traits. And I'm not going to say they're necessarily, they're not progressive necessarily. Maybe it's flattened, but kind of like interwoven. So I think about that, and I ask you the question, now that you've had at least 2 minutes of thinking time. What else is in that essential, somewhere around page 16? Again, I'm going by my notes. He talks a little bit about priorities, right? And then later on, he also throws down talking about, essentially doing the right thing with the right reason at the right time.
Yeah. And
feeling like you're making a significant contribution. So if we take the students and just put them to the side for a small, excuse me, students, what else is taking up space in that sort of essential space for you in education?
Like, this is just for me personally. This isn't like what I think the system needs.
That's why you're on blast.
I've had to think about it just for my own next steps. So I think for me, part of that essential piece that brings me joy would be the innovating and the designing piece. So pushing the envelope, not just doing things because we've done them. And when I don't have that freedom, I think I get into the hamster wheel of anytime somebody asks me to innovate, I'll just say yes, because I'm thirsty for that opportunity, and maybe not pushing where I need to push. And the designing piece, finding a way to communicate a message in a different format is exciting, which sounds really cheesy.
Can I push harder?
Yeah, go for
And
it.
this is for Barb too. Barb, you better answer this one too. Because I put this I put this tweet out asking if so in the book, somewhere around page right here on my phone, I don't know what it is, but there's a quote in here saying, if you could do only one thing with your life right now, what would you do? So I shaped it slightly, and I said, if you could do one thing for the rest of your teaching career, what would it be? As in, you could start to hyper focus on one task, idea, endeavor for the remaining time in your the question assumed the possibility, and it also assumed that someone would want to do it. I had a lot of posts back like, I don't want to do that. There's no way I want to do that. But it wasn't posts like, I don't want to do that because I have 10 things. It was just like, I don't want to do that. I can't see myself doing that. But could you see yourself doing one thing in education for the remainder of your career?
I've kind of done it for the last 9 years. Like the last 9 years have been focused on what can we do differently. That's pretty much the only question.
Zita, that's abstract.
I know, but
that's so abstract. Because basically what you're saying, I've been focused on one thing, doing a whole bunch of stuff that I like.
No, but it seems abstract, but I think the piece today, this morning, playing with a teacher, it really is just playing with new technologies.
Okay.
If you want it that way. Everything I do comes back down to playing with new technologies. And I hate saying new technologies because I would hope that it's something else, but usually it comes through the tools.
Okay.
And if I could just keep playing with new technologies to see how they work, I don't know. I don't want to have to give up other things. I don't like that idea.
So trade-offs. Right? And that's part of something that comes up a little bit in the book, talking, I mean, you have to be prepared to sort of recognize, I think in some ways it sells the trade-offs a little bit more from the point of view of a kind of a supportive frame, like you're actually trading off for a benefit.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Whoa, good one. Was that you?
No, I think Catherine's jumping in. So Barb said, interesting.
Catherine, good sound effect. It's like it sounded like you dropped a big book on. It sounded like you did like the 1975 thing of no one's listening in math class, so the teacher just goes boom and drops the math text on the desk.
I'm sorry.
No problem. That was a nice entry. Keep going, Tina.
So Barb said, interesting question, Chris. What if you take the students out of the equation? What else is essential to teaching? And she's paraphrasing. She said, like what Tina said, design, I really enjoyed trying to create new ways of teaching. A lot of it these days is how to design self-directed lessons. But would I still have a job if allowed to do this one essential thing? Great point.
But see, that's what I was saying. I was setting up a possible future. A possible future. If you could choose, Catherine, to do one thing. So a favorite thing, a preferred thing for the rest of your teaching career, what would you choose to do?
What do you mean by one thing? Do you mean like one unit, one topic, one like...
I have been accused as being the master of open-ended questions.
So that would be your one thing.
I'm not going to tell you. Yeah, there's my one thing. That's all I want to do. I want to stand in front of a class for like 3 periods straight and just be able to ask open-ended questions and have conversation. No joke. No joke. I would love, if I could do that, just be in a, I would have to teach philosophy maybe. I don't know, but if it's not tied to curriculum, I would say the one thing that I would enjoy beyond anything. Now understand, I'm trained I can do lots of things. I am so trained. But the truth of it is, if I could sort of have the hub that everything would sort of spiral out from, it would be able to to keep being able to ask questions and have conversation. So Catherine, your turn.
So you're asking me my one thing.
Your one thing. Actually, I'll go one deeper just because it's about the book. What's your one essential thing?
My one essential thing probably would be to have my students look beyond the classroom.
But what are you doing?
Oh,
What do you like? I want to put you at the heart of this, right?
okay.
I know I'm going
Like,
hardball. Sorry.
no, that's okay. I feel like I feel like I jumped into this conversation halfway through. Um, I, what did Tina say?
I said playing with new tools or designing.
Okay.
Barb said designing. So I'll take new tools. I have new tools. Chris has open questions, and Barb has designing. We have a trio already going on.
I feel like my one thing is connection though. Like it's about like, I think anything that I do or I teach, if it's not taught sort of in the context of outside of just my classroom, I feel like it's lost on a lot of kids. So connection. I think that can be it can also be connection to each other, connection to the community. I think, yes, connection is my one thing.
One of the pieces that we started with, we just touched on it lightly, was the idea of choice. So we kind of have, I mean, Zita mentioned, I think you said rat race. We did something like rat race or hamster wheel, that idea of, we landed quickly on not even realizing or forgetting that we have choice. Here's the next layer to my question, which I just figured out I wanted to ask now. So if these are the things that you perceive to be essential, and I'm going to say of interest, of high value, and no yawning, and your
do you have your Coke this week?
I do.
So if these are the things that are of high interest and high value to you, are you making choices to keep them in your practice and bloom them? Thus, you're going to start making trade-offs. You're going to have to start making.
My friend gave me the book.
Who is it again? It's Jason?
Jay Richey, yeah. Jason.
Jay Richey. He's a good person to follow too. Anyone
yeah, we just keep name dropping.
Yeah, we're
lots of night.
Yeah, lots of hat tips. So what choices are you making to keep this element in your daily, and sort of thinking about it long term, where you're saying, you know what, this is the carrier wave between now and whenever. So of course it is the one thing, it is the essential thing. The other part in this, Catherine, before you jumped in, part of the question that I asked is, if we take the students out of the equation. No, I didn't say, I said that I changed it. If we just move the students aside for a second, what else in your practice is essential? So if we just move them to the side to get a look at what else is in that bubble, what else is in there? So that was the starting point for our convo. And now we're in that, what choices are you making to align yourself with this high interest, high value, probably gonna have to make trade-offs in order to keep it in your teacher life? Simple question, come on.
While she's thinking, I think that's what stood out between that chart when it says I have to versus I choose to. Like, how many times do we get stuck in the I have to do this? I don't know. I think it always trumps, which is part of reading the book.
And I think it's hard because, right, like there are a lot of things that we feel like we choose to do because they do align with our values and the things that we find are essential.
I think that's why, Chris, when you say to put students aside, I think I struggle.
Yes.
But I think with that is part of the struggle, is that with education, and almost that point where you were talking about from the Daniel Pink article, about transcendence, right? A lot of us came into it. I think all three of us here for sure probably believe we're in education because education isn't just a job, but it's investing in the future of our society kind of big pieces. And
that's a yes no for me. I can
no?
But yes no.
I guess the idea
no yes in that order. Yeah.
See, I guess the idealist in me that believes that lets me hold on to more things than I need to, right? I think that it's an illusion in my head that I say I choose to, but really, I don't know how many of them I'm doing for other reasons, or because I think I can justify them with that bigger picture, future, good for the next person kind of justification. Does any of that make sense?
I feel like both of you are skirting around the trade-offs question, though, in order to keep this in your world.
So okay. I'm going to jump in on this.
No. Let me tell you something first, because I think this touches on a real nerve not a nerve, but a sensitive spot in educators, that being strategic to place your happiness and your interest in what you're doing in your own center. And I think now I'm starting to realize why this happens sometimes, why I asked the question about just moving the students aside for a second, is it had to do with, because then all that's left is self. It's you. You mentioned it, Tina, as far as motivation to come into teaching. You pushed it my way. I say it's a no, yes. I can tell the story at the end as to how I came into teaching. I discovered the yes, but it didn't start there. It was a no to your statement in the beginning. But I think there's something really interesting there when we do keep our interests, what we're driving at. Now, this book is not written for educators, and there's some spots in here where you kind of have to go, come on, Greg, really? But if we take it as a more of a philosophy, then what I take from this is, if we do move what everybody will jump on first, which is supporting student success, and just shift it to the side, I think it's a valuable exercise to examine what is there in that space. Because if it's only student success, that can be a really abstract way to hang your whole career drive on. And I would say Greg might have a problem with that. He might have a problem with that, because it isn't as self-directed as I think he would like it to be. Now, unless you're sort of come back as a Yabaclough, those are my values.
But it's a service. We're also in a service job. So I don't know. In any service job, would you do what you do if you didn't? I don't know. At what point does the self need to make sure that it doesn't? The self needs to stay in check, I guess.
I think I was struggling to understand the question.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think, this is sort of the one catch-22 that I can think of is, their essential thing is to always be doing better. That's something that is the most important thing, is I will be a better teacher today than I felt like I was yesterday. Like, it makes it really difficult to pinpoint one thing, because I don't know, like that is in a category, it's one thing, but how you actually go about doing that can look so many different ways.
But I guess that's Chris's point, is that it's too
broad.
That by being so abstract, are we losing or not? Maybe it comes back to that third chapter when he talks about discerning more than the choice. Because I think the choice comes back, I don't know. I think the choice is always, it's easy to say, but harder to do. But I think it's the discerning that makes the struggle real, if that makes sense.
Can I throw something else bizarre into the conversation?
Sure. Go for it.
Catherine, is it okay? Like, I know I jumped on you before. I posted out one time, just sort of like, it was an observation about all the learning. Sorry, I'll go this a different direction. All the stuff that I do, non-teacher side, that benefits education. So the stuff that is done on behalf of teaching and education of my students when I'm not actually around education, teaching, and my students. And what I posted out, and I got a few bites off it on Twitter, was, can you clearly articulate how education has made you better and sort of traded off for you and sort of improved your humanness in the same way that you've contributed to the betterment of education? And there are a few people, again, one of those kind of questions, but it's it kind of boiled down to looking at the relationship there. How reciprocal is it? And kind of, I had some really great conversations with people that they agreed. They're like, yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff that I do to better education when I'm away from education. I bring it back to the class, and I'm working on student success all the time. And I said, well, let's flip it on its head. Where do you see that school has improved that? And I put a few limiters on there. Don't tell me about like monetary ends here. And don't tell me about sort of holidays or time away kind of thing. Like, don't take the sort of like the common roads here. Tell me about where you've in your life outside of education has been enriched because you're a teacher. And quite a few teachers I'm assuming they're all teachers, that's pretty much on my feed, but they had a hard time answering that. They had a hard time committing to that. I think part of it is that we are consumed with seeing the student and the school as the hub of our growth. And when you had said the teacher, Catherine, you had said something to the effect of, you had mentioned something about improving yourself, constant improvement.
Yes.
And in my brain, I was already saying, yes, I think we should constantly improve ourselves as humans. And then you said teacher, and that's why I was shaking my head. Because I started to say, no, I think the focus should be us improving ourselves as far as humans. And the corollary will be that everything around us in our spaces will become better. But we don't have that conversation, I think, as fluidly, at least as much as I would like to.
So you're almost looking at our identity beyond educators.
Well, I would say our identity, period. And then what do you want to put in that bucket afterwards? Gotcha. Because I think if we are willing to say that our identity is so firmly tethered to being an educator, for me, that becomes problematic. That becomes really problematic. I feel as if there's a lot of limiters. There's a lot of benefits, but I feel that it limits greatly.
I'm in trouble then.
I don't think it's a trouble thing. Okay, wait. Unless you want to shape that a little bit. What just happened?
Like, I can see where the outside, like where my interests have influenced my educational career. Like, I think of something as simple as the 100-day challenge that Ella Luna puts out, and I can articulate what I've learned every year through that project. That really is just for me, but I don't, the identifying as something other than a teacher, like I wanted to be a teacher since I was 6. I was teaching kids when I was 10. I don't know, in a variety of different contexts. Of course, I wasn't in a classroom, but I don't know how to separate that part of my identity, I guess.
You have choice.
I have choice.
You have choice. Did you not read the first 2 chapters? You have choice.
Okay, so I'm going to pose a question.
Do it. I love this.
So if for some reason tomorrow you could no longer be a teacher, what impact would the last however many years have on your decisions for the future?
I don't, I'm sure that my educational career would impact my next steps. I think being the reflection that we go through as educators, I think doesn't always do me well in life in general. If we blogged and posted about everything else in life that happens except for educate, like I overthink things, so I think it definitely has trickled into life in general. The empathy piece and designing for people, and not gut reacting. I think that's something I take away from the AQ courses of how to interact with people or how to design for people. So I think there's takeaways for sure. I just can't imagine them outside of education.
I can answer it concretely. I mean, I guess my finances would take a hit if that's what you're talking about, Catherine. Like the finances, I would have to reconfigure home life. I mean, my kids, and the plans that we make in the summers and the holidays. Like there's certain social structures in my life that would shift because I'm an educator, my spouse is an educator, and my kids are all students. Like we're all inside the silo, right? Mm-hmm. And that creates a real sort of cozy oneness of us all being on the same schedule. So financially it would change. Socially we would have to switch things up. Where I would counter is it's likely I would go to one of my other passions, which is cooking. So I'd probably go back to working in restaurants, or probably go back and get my snowboarding certification. Like I would probably do the things that were also like and this is, I think, where my backstory comes into play when I was shaking my head as far as, improving myself as a teacher so that the human gets better, or looking at the things that I do to improve my human side. You know what I'm saying? Like my time away from teaching, as there's elements that happen away. Teaching is one of the elements that's on par with my other life experiences. And to keep those things in balance is a constant sort of weight and counterweight exercise. I have skills in hospitality. I would end up going back and running restaurants again. Would I come back to teaching when the opportunity afforded me? I can't honestly say that I would. And this goes back to my story for coming into education, is that there was a conversation at the time about how mine and my spouse's life were changing, and whether or not what type of life we wanted to have. What was essential? What was the essential, and what's the choices that were in front of us? And the choices were for me to keep running restaurants and for her to continue in education. But there would have been trade-offs. The trade-off, one of the most explicit trade-offs, and we had this conversation, is that we likely would not have children, because it was very clear that for her to have to, where are we? I'm still back here. For her to sort of be a single parent, it's not right. So the trade-off would be I had to make change. I had to look at what was at the core of the decision and make the decision and go for it. So that's how I came into education. I didn't know. I want to cap this because I don't want to take up so much screen time, but like I'm not a person that liked school at any measure along the way. The karma irony, as my mom would say, is that, I've found a place in niche teaching and special education guidance, alt ed, like these spaces where I'm working with a lot of students that are resistant to being in school. So if I kind of go, okay, Clough, big purpose, you're where you're supposed to be, but I also look at it as temporary. I don't know if teaching is going to be forever for me. So this is where I get conflicted here. If I lay this essentialism against my career as a teacher, then what it does is it reminds me that so much of what I've done so far is temporary. And that even though I'm focusing on it being essential, it's essential for now. And that is in some ways in step with my value system, which is be as authentic and present in what I'm doing when I'm doing it. I took a pay cut when I left hospitality to come into teaching. It is likely, had I stayed in hospitality, if I look at it purely from a monetary perspective, I'd be making more money now. But that was the trade-off. So
you're asking what are our trade-offs?
Well, you guys still haven't said.
What our trade-offs are?
Well, we kind of where
I sleep.
I saw that that's one of the chapter titles. That should be interesting.
Yeah. I like William James's quote on page something. My first act of free will shall be to believe in free will. I love that, because I think that's where the author's just like doesn't get education. I'm not sure that that element, just to declare, yep, I'm getting up out of the staff meeting right now. I have it. Well, okay, sorry. You do have a choice to get up out of that staff meeting. I guess you do.
Yeah. With the trade-offs, I think the word that keep popping up was that straddling.
Yeah.
And I think that's somewhere that I may get stuck in. Like I love the comment about Like you have 10 minutes and you try to squish in one more email, and then everything is just behind, I may suffer from that. But the other idea that kept coming up was the creed. And I guess to your point, Chris, earlier, the hard part in education is we can have these very vague beliefs that make that discernment harder because we haven't truly articulated what it is that's driving us.
I think there's a skill there in being able to articulate that. I think there's got to be a skill there. There's so much to what we do that's based on prior knowledge, templates, bell changes. Like they're really, when you mentioned before the rat race or the hamster wheel, there's a lot of things that are more become autonomous without any autonomy. We just kind of, we follow along with this queuing system, which I think starts to really, it gets in our head and it lives there, you know?
Yeah. So I'm just even thinking about the trajectory of teaching and coming back to this whole idea of like choosing. There are so many things that we don't have a choice around. For example, like, well, I guess, okay, sorry, maybe we do have a choice. We have the choice to say no, right? Like I'm thinking about starting off as a supply teacher. When you get a call, I guess you have the choice to say yes or to say no to that particular assignment. But saying no to that assignment also, you know, has certain consequences. And I feel like maybe that's why teachers maybe sometimes feel like they do have to say yes to a lot of things because, sorry, I'm just going back to the beginning, but this is just sort of a revelation for me. It's like maybe there are certain things where like it's sort of ingrained in the system a little bit that you have some choice, but there are other things where like you could say no, but the consequence of that is that you don't get a choice to teach anymore.
Just jumping in with Barb's comments here, if that's okay. So Catherine's question is a good one to contemplate as a teacher heads towards retirement. I'm getting closer. We're very jealous, Barb. So I have been asking myself what I will do after teaching. And then one of the quotes I liked relates to tonight's discussion, page 45, just to rub it in a bit more there, Chris. What is the most valuable result I could achieve in this job? Much better way of posing it, I guess, than that creed or that...
Have you guys heard of this like Japanese concept of ikigai?
Walk us through it.
So I'm just looking at, I've read a book and it's come up a few times, but I'm just looking at this graphic. It's a Japanese concept meaning a reason for being. And it's a mixture between what you love, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs.
Can you post? Do you have a link to that?
Yes, I have an image.
Cool.
My images are very helpful for me. And I also heard about it. I was reading Neil Patricia's The Happiness Equation earlier this year, and that came out again. This idea of ikigai, you know, something that you do that is your life's work, and you don't stop doing it just because you retire. So I'm thinking about that in sort of the context of, for me, like what is my ikigai, even if if I retire from teaching, which is a way down the line, or if I don't do teaching anymore for some reason, like what matters to me, what is my contribution? I think for me, there are a lot of things that I can think of that I would want to pursue. Like, for example, justice. Like that is something I see education as one way of living that out, is like, giving kids opportunities that maybe they don't have, or opening their eyes to different things, or learning with them. I see all of this sort of, it's like something I'm passionate about, but also something that I care deeply and that offers something to the broader world. Something to mull over.
Barb had another quote while you're mulling that over. I also liked, and this quote really relates to the day-to-day craziness of teaching, you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything.
Mm-hmm.
A great thing to come out during report card time.
Oh, gosh.
I think
that's from Richard. I think it's...
Is that the one you were chatting about earlier? Page 45,
a little bit.
Said. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just cruising past that one. I don't know, on my iPhone it says page 133. I know that's messed up, but
almost at the end of chapter 3.
Gotcha. Sorry, I jumped on your words. What were you thinking?
No, I can't remember, so it can't be that important.
Can I put something to you too?
Sure.
You too? Do you have any sense of the things that you have to get done in the remaining time that you have in your career?
Should I?
Well,
I was like,
if I bring it back to the book,
yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Because one of the things that this book doesn't talk much about opportunism. It's a little bit more stone cold, making the decision with the information that's in front of you. Like it really personalizes it, brings it right up close and saying, here's a fork in the road, multi-fork.
Yeah.
Choose wisely, because if you split yourself and walk down all of them, you're screwed. Like you really do have to make a focused next step based on your values and what you find, because that's the multiple, right? That's the multiple. And then which are the ones that are most vital. I have these days where I wake up in the morning and I think about the amount of time I have left in education. Now, the amount of time I have left is based on a metric of retirement. There's other things that could pull me away from education. There's one of the quotes here. I lost it somewhere. It has something to do with, and I don't know if it's beyond the scope of what we're talking about right now, but there's that quote of that measurement. If I didn't have this opportunity now, what would I be willing to do to acquire it? So it makes you sort of reevaluate the steps that you would take right now to get to the place that you're in. And I kind of jump out of that and I think to myself, with the amount of time that I have left, if I stay in education, what is it that I know I want to get done?
I feel like that's a really hard question to answer, because just like what you said, the opportunities that come up, like we can't necessarily anticipate all of those things. And I think that if we hold too strongly to something, then we miss out on those opportunities to grow. Like, just case in point, like the position that I'm in this year as grade 7-8 guidance, like this was a new position that the board created last year. I didn't have it out in my plan to do a guidance role, but this was an opportunity that presented itself. And now having done it, I have like new experiences that I can then bring back to not just to teaching, but new understandings of inequalities in the system, new understandings of like what options are for kids after high school. So I don't think that for me, there's not one thing that I say I have to accomplish before the end of my time in teaching.
Are you willing to do things to hang on to this particular portfolio? And what I mean by that is this portfolio that has been presented to you that you said, I'm gonna take it on. You didn't see it coming, but you took it on. You made the choice. I'm going to assume it was based on a value system, that you looked at it as like it was important to you. Now that you're in it, are there steps that you will now take to hang on to that?
Okay, so I guess this goes back to the trade-off. It's a matter. So the trade-off is, if I stay in this position, I lose the position that I was in last year.
Okay. And
so that's a decision that I will have to make in a few months. Is, do I take a risk and continue in this position, or do I return to the position that I was in before?
So you don't know yet?
No.
Do you have a method for measuring that, or are you going to arrive at the end? And this isn't I'm curious because
cost benefit analysis part of it, to be honest.
This is living the questions that are out of the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're between the three of us in that position of having to sort of really crystallize your value system into next steps. Okay, let me ask you something. Is there at any point in this next little bit of time that's a tipping point, is in you're going to have to do work to commit to this job in the future? Does that make sense? Like you sort of like you get over this hump where you're going to have to, and sometimes this happens with staffing, right? You have to kind of say whether or not you're going to put your head, they're going to say, what do you want to do next? Do you want to keep your name on 2 lists, or do you want to stay in this side? And then we're going to see if we're going to have the funding and you're going to develop, or do you sort of say, no, you know what? I'm happy to go back to my other teaching life.
Well, I think this is funny because this is a conversation I also have that with like my husband, because, you know, the role that I'm in currently, it's a little bit different than what I do in the classroom. And so he's asked me, Catherine, do you like working with 1,000 students across 12 different schools, or do you want to have a classroom again where you get to grow those relationships with your kids? And I think that's a very real question that I'm pondering over. I'll be honest, there are lots of days this year where I said, I really miss being in the classroom. And the trade-off right now is I have a lot of flexibility. I get to meet new kids, but do I value that more than the long-term relationship? And I don't know that I do. Like, I think, yeah.
What about you, Z?
Well, I tried to figure it out last week, but I didn't. My job's coming to an end, and this has given me the best of both worlds. I get to still have those relationships with kids. It's different, 40 schools, 1,000 teachers, but at least there's still that contact, and while also getting to influence a system, designing, doing things that I never would have considered. And I think that's the one thing that came to mind is last week, I literally every day I thought of something different. And I even debated just taking a year off, but that actually requires you to have a plan. So that didn't work out. So, and I guess I wonder if in the business world, there's a different, like, is there more autonomy? Is that just an illusion? Because so much of having, like every choice I make has repercussions, like they're not even trade-offs that I'm deciding. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So if I take a year to do something fun, that means I trade off the possibility of impacting a system at a more global level. Impacting the system at a more global level means I trade off that classroom piece. And it's not something that you can just, I think that's the hard part with education. It's not just something I can just come to when I'm ready for it, because our structures are set up really weird.
I love that you throw in global level, because you just sort of like, okay, let me say.
Did I say global? I didn't mean global, but I just meant like big picture, not global. There is a dream project, but
I will tell you from when I was running restaurants, and you know, often in education we say that low floor, high ceiling kind of a thing.
Yeah.
When I was running restaurants, no floor, high ceiling.
Yeah.
And what you're building in between, you're building superstructure kind of like floating in the sky, because part of it is very much bottom line driven. There's a lot of the other soft skills that are a part of it, but at the end of the day, I had numbers that I had to satisfy some way, somehow. So the trade-offs would have been, so an example of a trade-off is me underneath the sink on New Year's Eve fixing the grease trap, because we're not going to get a repairman in, and if the grease trap isn't patched and fixed in some way, then we're not going to be able to do the second service. By me being underneath there having to do that, then I'm not up at the front calling out the orders. So this was, again, a very sort of like concrete kind of a trade-off. But again, no floor, high ceiling, because the potential for growth was high, very high. Okay. I love how you said at a global level. And I want to hold you on that just for a second, even if you didn't mean to make it. If you say, what was the other thing you wanted to say? You said not global,
I guess
but
more of a big picture or more of a
perfect.
provincial. So, I'd settle for provincial.
Provincial works too. Believe me, it's all chum in the water. I'm ready for this one.
Oh
so I'll bring it back to, are you intentionally building something that's moving towards that? So you just declared a contact point with the other. You just sort of identified something that's a part of your value that would be a trade-off. And do you feel, either maybe inadvertently or intentionally, that this is something that you've been building for a while? Like, this is sort of like that strange kind of phasing of what are you preparing for in your next phase? As in, have you been building a self that intentionally needs to connect with that bigger, wider picture? And then you lay that against a classroom of 30 kids.
But I also think that sometimes we assume, and this is just because this is where my brain has gone in circles for like 2 weeks. There's an assumption that that global or bigger picture happens outside the 30 kids, but for some people, those connections actually happen more with the 30 kids than that what we perceive to be a big picture moment. I guess I get that it comes back down to those choices. But I think that's why when he kind of said that creed, I think that's where I'm struggling. It's like being able to value two masters right now, and having to decide on one is not cool. And I just want to keep doing them both.
I love it.
Somebody make me a job that lets me do both.
Barbara threw in here a little while ago. She said, how much control do we have? How much control do we have as teachers to determine what overarching goals we will achieve in education? We are driven by curriculum passed down from above. That makes me sad. That makes me sad, that statement. Part of it is that I'm not quite sure how to challenge it, but I get it. I do get it. There's a superstructure that just kind of like, I think of like Play-Doh, and how you can put in Play-Doh into those molds and you squeeze it and it comes out stars, or comes out spaghetti string, or it comes out some funky character's hair, it comes out the top. And there's that element of being creative, which it is, but it's creative according to a very narrow template, right? Yeah. And
that's what's exciting, to think about changing that template.
I've done that, and then the pieces just don't go back together. Those Play-Doh things are made out of they're cheap plastic.
But I mean like maybe it's bypassing the template altogether. And I don't really believe that, because I always go back to a comment Rowan made, but he probably doesn't remember, that curriculum is about equity. It's about ensuring we all have access to a shared knowledge, and that we all are entitled to it. So I don't know. I think that is exactly that struggle for me. Is I love the idea that we can change, that is a choice we make in education, because at its core, it's us as educators that are doing that work. It's us as a community that is voting in the people that run those decisions. But then that gets idealistic and big picture and too crazy again. Just allows me to get away from actually having to make a choice and blame everybody else. I love that. I'm saying this stuff out loud.
I just want to jump in on something else that Barbara, she sort of has continued to type here on the Twitter chat. She was saying how she misses the connections with her students in her ESL classroom, but being in the library has allowed her to work with more students. But then at the same time, it's a little bit limited because she has to find a teacher who wants to bring his or her or their students to her. And I feel like that's a little bit how I feel in my role, is like I have a chance to impact on like a system level, but it also, I have to sort of ask permission of the teacher that I'm working with. And I feel like in the classroom, Like, yes, there's a curriculum that we're given, but I think we have a lot of freedom with that curriculum.
I guess that's where, when we come to what's essential,
Mm-hmm.
am I wanting that option because of the autonomy? Or am I wanting that option because I think it really is what I can give back to kind of what you were saying, what that key piece is that I have to give. I don't, I think that's the biggest piece with all of this is where the ego fits into it, right? A lot of it does come back to ego, perceptions. And I think that's one struggle with education. I think in the business world, there is more of an acceptance of this is my choice, I'm good with it. Where I feel like in education, my choice is based on 500 other people's choices around me. And oftentimes I can choose. I have that helpless illusion of helplessness, I guess, because I'm worried about the perceptions of others, if that makes sense. Like I think I don't know any other job where you're with people that much for that long of a time. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm assuming. Just looking at the time, though.
So,
yeah.
I have a thought on page 57 where it says, essentialist asks, what can I go big on? I think we also have to redefine this idea of going big. I think a lot of the time people, like, they see you doing a good job and they'd be like, oh, you're going to move up. You're going to be, do admin stuff, do district system level stuff. And I think sometimes going big doesn't have to look the same for everyone. It doesn't have to mean like starting your own initiative. I think going big can be making an intentional decision to commit to a community and being there for 25 years. Like, I think maybe we have this, maybe it comes back to an ego thing about like, our understanding of what it means to go big on something. Yeah.
I'd agree with that. I think if we're prepared to do that, though, somewhere in chapter 4, it talks about we also have to have a willingness to stand up and say, this is not an important project for me to work on. And that's so incredibly difficult because of how some of the information comes down to us about what we need to be working. Not what we would need to be working, but even in the staff meeting, there's a thing that just gets system objectives that are brought to you, right? But I've yet to see someone stand up and say, this is not, it happens. You know what? I would say it has happened in subject head meetings, like smaller spaces, but like a whole staff where you've got 80 people in an auditorium. I've yet to hear someone say, you know what? I think, this is the wrong direction to go with our literacy initiative. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit more, because everyone that has their stuff prepared to speak about the literacy initiative is like, who invited that guy? Like, so I do think that I agree with you, Catherine, if the idea of going big is it can be a singularity of time that we're spending a lot of time dipping and drilling deeper. But I would put that as well within that. I think we have to develop that willingness to say that as we drill deeper in a single space, we also have to develop that idea of saying, no, this is not what this single space needs. Because to sort of develop that one single space, let's say you are just developing an equity lens, I think there needs to be some best defense to say, no, like we're not going to get to this achievable end if we're constantly like prototyping all the way to the end. And that's a really difficult, I think, for someone to kind of put the brakes on and say, we're now doing too much. Mm-hmm. We're now doing too much. We either need to sort of fragment and say this now becomes somebody else's initiative and we just do this thing. And in some ways, that's the metaphor for school. Let's kind of take it to there. The schools being that major hub and co-location space for so many different initiatives that kind of get really close to things like healthcare and, other mental wellness supports and social strength. Like there's a whole lot of stuff that kind of edges up to that curb. But going deep, I agree. It can be long game, like you said, 20 years, 25 years, doing a single thing really great. or really deep, I guess. I like that. I wouldn't do it. I'm just because I know for me that's not me. But I appreciate how that would be somebody else's approach for sure. Tina, close us up.
Close.
Yeah, you sing. You sing. Sing something.
I don't sing. Only in my car. So next session, what are we chatting about? As we contemplate choosing, discerning, and trade-offs. Part 2 looks like it focuses on discerning the trivial from the vital few. So it's interesting to see those ideas repeated.
I love chapter 5, escape. I liked that chapter.
So are we looking at all of part 2 next time?
Can we carry that? You want to go for it?
63, that's like 40
to
pages.
119.
50 pages.
It actually goes to 119, right?
Okay.
Because so it's 56. You do it?
Sure.
I'm okay with that.
I think we can do it.
In there.
Dude,
right.
Great flow tonight. That was cool.
I need sleep now.
Yeah, I know, eh? I hope.
Sorry for my loud entrance.
No worries at all.
Can I throw down one last thing from Barbara?
Yes. I can't believe I'm slacking here. Sorry.
She had a why are our
like
opportunities to go big invariably, like basically why do these to go big opportunities lead us away from working closely with students?
I like that.
That's like the consultant's conundrum.
Yes.
Now, Zita, you've made great. You and I think we talked about this at a previous ed tech thing, and you're tethered. You've said it. I have encountered this conversation. I'm pointing because it's on my screen right here. Sorry, but I have encountered this. The on ramp for some. Here's the last thing I'll say for sure.
Yeah.
If you're tethered, does that make the transition back to the classroom easier, or is it a different kind of tethering?
And what do we consider the classroom? There you have a different question. So if I went to a teacher librarian job, some people don't consider that going back to a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that is really the struggle. I've been lucky enough to be in a job where I've been able to carve that time or that experience that I wanted. Yeah. And I tried to advocate for carving that in a different role, but none of it's working out for me yet. What are they going to do? Can you not go to a school and hang out with kids? How could any job in education get mad at you for doing that?
But I think she's tapping into a whole other space as well, which kind of goes into these, education, these people that take up a lot of space in the digital spaces. And often the story is they taught for a decade or 15 years, and then they've gone off. Their consultancy has sort of led them into something else. And I think in a lot of ways, these are espoused as the big leaps. Like you go and you write your book, and then you go on your book tour, and then you sort of are doing, innovation talks. Like there's that whole idea of it. I think back in the day, some of the idea of going big was to become an administrator. I think we've shifted. Now that part of going big is one of the trade-offs might be is that you have to almost choose to leave a board to kind of go independent and go almost like entrepreneur style. So there's something to what she's asking here.
No,
how do we sort of
one with that you lose your authenticity and coming back to, I don't know how to say it. I know a friend shared the graphic with the Japanese model that has the 4 intersecting circles.
Yeah.
You were saying, Catherine?
Yeah.
It's how do you stay true and not make decisions? Comes back to that first chapter, right? The decisions where you're just saying yes to things so that you can keep the opportunities coming versus saying yes to things because I don't want to say no because no seems very set. And I think we all make mistakes at times with our choices, but that you've at least made that conscious choice of a path because it consolidates back with those 4 intersections. I don't know.
No, that's good.
Okay. Good end. So looking at part 2 and we're chatting. What day is that?
2 weeks. It's family day.
Oh, okay.
Is that a yay or nay?
I can do it at night.
Yeah.
I have to go back to work, but how anybody?
Yeah.
I'm clear. I mean, this is a good time. It's sort of, either way, kids are going to be down. Life is calming. So.
Okay.
I'm going to try to read the next five chapters in the lens of a human as opposed to just an educator.
It ain't easy.
Yeah.
Oh.
For sure. All right. So let's all say goodnight to Barbara.
Good night, Barbara.
Good night, Barbara. Thanks for chiming in on the outside. I like that. I like that for sure. Okay. You guys are awesome.
Okay. See you guys.
Do we sign off?
Yep.
Okay. Air high five. There we go.